Welcome back to Ghost Pirate Entertainment. I'm your host, Kanan Becker, and today we do another deep dive into Tubi. And with that, let's get to the list. The Tunnel is a 2011 Australian found footage horror movie, directed by Carlo Ledesma in his featured directorial debut. It stars Belle Delia, Andy Rodoreda, and Steve Davis. An investigation into a government cover-up leads to a network of abandoned train tunnels deep beneath the heart of Sydney.
Directly below one of Sydney's busiest train stations is the forgotten water resource that's causing all the controversy.
So I've heard about this movie for a long time now, but this was my first time watching it. Whenever I talk about found footage movies, there's at least one or two of you guys that mention, hey, what about The Tunnel? Hey, have you seen The Tunnel? And it's been on my list forever. So I finally was like, you know what? This week I'm watching it. And I'm so glad I did, because this movie is really good. This is now one of my favorite found footage movies that I've seen in a very long time. Honestly, it's probably one of my favorites I've ever seen. It's that good. Because it's creepy, it's uncomfortable, it's disturbing. It goes in a lot of different directions and has a lot of surprises as it goes. But it's also a movie that it's rewarding if you pay attention to it, because there's a lot of detail and a lot of layers that I think are easy to skip over and miss. But it's well acted, well directed, the editing is on point. It's just a really good movie. And if you haven't seen it and you're a fan of found footage, this is one you definitely need to see.
Death Becomes Her.
Death Becomes Her is a 1992 satirical surrealist black comedy. So at the time of recording this, my favorite movie this year hasn't been a secret. I have not been keeping this a secret at all. It's The Substance. I think it's a phenomenal movie, and hopefully more people will be able to see it soon, because it should be streaming, I think, any day. This is much more campy, much more satirical and silly, whereas The Substance is funny, but it takes it in a much more darker direction, and it's definitely full of body horror and things like that. But it's full of star power, and it has that great late 80s, early 90s aesthetic to it. Just the sensibility, the way people talk, dress, all of that. It's fun to see the world at this time as well. But I'm also a big fan of the creating style of Robert Zemeckis. Everything he created, especially in this era, is just fun. None of it takes itself too serious. It is darker edged, especially in this. So if it's been a while since you've seen this, or if you've never seen it, I think this is a fantastic pick.
Welcome to the greatest show on earth!
Circus of the Dead is a 2014 splatter horror movie, co-written and directed by Billy Bloody Bill Pond. It stars Bill Oberst Jr., Parrish Randall, and Chanel Ryan. A sadistic group of clowns kidnap an unsuspecting man and his daughters, forcing him to play a deadly game in order to save his family.
Silence is golden.
So with Terrifier 3 coming out, and just more and more people all the time talking about the Terrifier franchise and how much they love it and all of that, I can't help but think about this movie and the fact that they're making a sequel to it and how it has potential to maybe become a franchise. At the very least, more well known, because it does have a cult following, but a pretty small one. And granted, this movie is not as funny, it's not as silly, it doesn't lean into the humor as much as Terrifier. This is very bleak, it's very dark, it's really uncomfortable in a lot of scenes. It goes for it in every possible way in order to offend you. Not only with the gore, but with SA elements and every other abhorrent, awful thing you can think of. But as far as a grimy, dirty, gritty movie, an indie horror movie goes, if you enjoy dark and bleak and just really ruthless splatter horror and you've never seen this, it needs to be the next thing you watch.
That small thought. It's all it takes.
to lose control.
Possessor is a 2020 sci-fi psychological horror movie. Written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg, it stars Andrea Riseborough, Christopher Abbott, and Rossif Sutherland. The story's about an assassin who performs her assignments through possessing the bodies of other individuals, but finds herself fighting to control the body of her current host.
Ready?
This was absolutely one of my favorite movies from 2020. And since then, I've just become a big fan of Brandon Cronenberg. Of course, I love his father, David Cronenberg. I mean, he's one of my favorite filmmakers of all time. But Brandon is quickly becoming one of my favorites as well, because he doesn't lean quite into the body horror in the same way that his dad does. But his movies are still very dark and twisted and have a lot of sci-fi futuristic elements to them. They're all well shot, well directed, and definitely make you think at the end. But this one is probably still my favorite that he's done. And a lot of that has to do with the cast. Andrea Riseborough and Christopher Abbott are both incredible in this movie. But even the side characters, everybody in this gives an amazing performance. But this gets dark and gritty and absolutely brutal and goes for it, especially in the final act. But it is a real twisted, mindfuck kind of horror movie, which is one of my favorite kinds of horror movie. So if you're a fan of psychological sci-fi horror, this is a fantastic pick. The Exorcism of God is a 2021 supernatural horror movie, co-written and directed by Alejandro Hidalgo. It stars Will Bainbrook, Iran Castillo, and Joseph Marcel. An American priest working in Mexico is possessed during an exorcism and ends up committing a terrible act. Years later, the consequences of his act come back to haunt him.
The inmates have suffered the influence of the evil one.
She has symptoms of epilepsy, hysteria.
So like most of you guys out there, I am tired of possession horror, religious horror. So much of it just feels like the same thing reproduced to make money over and over. And obviously people are getting tired of it in the same way we've seen an audience fatigue when it comes to zombie movies. But just like with zombie movies, if it's done right, when they're done well, and when there is a unique twist, something that makes it feel fresh and exciting, they're still worth seeing. And this is the case with this, because it doesn't focus on exorcisms. That's not the point here. The point is this priest and the things that happen. I don't want to give it away because pretty early on in this movie, there's a twist that it takes, and it makes this whole movie feel different and come at it from a real kind of unique point of view. But it goes for it as well and doesn't take itself too serious. There's fun special effects, some blood, some gore. It's just a very entertaining movie and one that I highly recommend.
If I let you go, you think you could fly?
The Good Son.
The Good Son is a 1993 psychological thriller. Directed by Joseph Rubin, it stars Macaulay Culkin, Elijah Wood, and Wendy Crewson. A young boy stays with his aunt and uncle and becomes friends with his cousin, a boy of the same age, who shows increasing signs of violent and psychopathic behavior.
Say goodbye. You know you did. You could have killed people.
I feel like this movie has been forgotten because I remember back when it came out and for a while after, there was a lot of buzz around it. A lot of people raved about, especially Elijah Wood and his performance in it. And now looking back, we know that even though this was billed as, hey, Macaulay Culkin, Elijah Wood was the true star in this, the one that would really go on to become an amazing actor. But I do think Macaulay Culkin did a great job in this of being this evil, conniving little bastard. And it's interesting too, because I've seen a lot of movies since that had elements that reminded me of this. Like for one, The Orphan. There's a lot of things in The Orphan that reminded me of this, as well as Megan. Megan had some stuff too that reminded me of it. It's a fun thrill ride that keeps you guessing all the way to the end. And I think it's a great pick to add to your list.
Five are on the run. Can they escape the spreading fury of the Crazies?
The Crazies is a 1973 sci-fi horror movie. Written and directed by George A. Romero, it stars Lane Carroll, Will McMillan, and Harold Wayne Jones. The military attempts to contain a man-made combat virus that causes death and permanent insanity in those infected as it overtakes a small Pennsylvania town.
We were asleep. They dragged us right out of the house.
Are we under martial law?
Don't talk to me or anybody else unless you got a voice print check. All hell's broke loose in town. Nobody knows what's going on.
I really think this movie has been overlooked in a lot of ways because whenever we talk about George A. Romero, we talk about his Dead series, all his zombie movies, and I get it, rightfully so. Like, they're incredible movies. They're amazing. I love them, don't get me wrong. But I think this is just as good as a lot of those and does deserve to get more attention than it gets because it is just as impactful and powerful message as any of his other movies. And it's a really eerie watch. I just rewatched it for the first time in many years, and it's creepy how much it reminded me of the pandemic in the early stages in 2020 and what we all went through. This movie is eerily similar in a lot of ways. I mean, of course, it's to the extreme. We never, thank God, ever got to that level, but it does still feel very relevant. And I really like the way he shows it from both sides because you could easily have just made this bad military, the people are dealing with this, totalitarian kind of military, but it doesn't show it that way. It shows it as these are people on both sides and they're both scared and they're both trying to do their best in the situation that they're in. But it also shows what can happen when you mistrust each other and when fear is involved. And it's just so eerie and creepy because you see things in this that remind you so much of things we've actually seen happen and things that I'm sure we will see again, unfortunately, in the future. So if you're a fan of horror like I am and the history of horror and the pioneers, the people that started it all, George A. Romero has got to be near the top of that list of people that has just impacted and really created the foundation of horror that everything we see now is built upon. So I think this movie deserves more flowers than it gets and is definitely worth your time. Haunters, The Art of the Scare is a 2017 documentary. Created by John Schnitzer, it focuses on the history of haunted houses and the growing subculture of full-contact terror simulations.
What makes a great haunter is they're obsessed about it.
My wife sees Halloween essentially as a mistress that I cheat on her with.
It becomes addicting once you make that first scare, and then you can't stop.
So I love haunted houses. It's one of my favorite things this time of year. Every October, it's one of the things that I just have to do. Even if I go by myself, I have to go to a haunted house. And I haven't been scared by one in many, many years. That's not what I love about them. I love the theatrics of it. I love the art design of it, the creatures, the way they look. I love the sound, everything, and the way that it makes me feel. It takes me back to being a little kid with that excited feeling inside. And so I love this documentary because it delves into the history of haunted houses and why they are the way they are today and the foundation and just everything, the different phases that it's gone through, but it also shines a light on a lot of these extreme haunted houses, especially McCamey Manor, which he recently got in trouble. The guy is a twisted guy, but he recently got in trouble, I believe, for trying to have his wife killed. I mean, it's a really wild story. There's a bunch of YouTubers that follow him, but this was one of the first things to kind of shine a light on him and the stuff that he does. But if you're a fan of haunted houses like I am, this is just a really fun watch.
Besides prayer, there are other things which can be done.
Golem is a 2018 Israeli supernatural horror movie. Directed by Doran and UF Paz. It stars Hanny Furstenberg, Ishay Golem, and Bryony Furstenberg. During an outbreak of a deadly plague, a mystical woman must save her tight-knit Jewish community from foreign invaders. But the entity that she conjures is a danger to them all.
We could use the hidden code inside the Book of Creation and create ourselves a golem.
I have always been fascinated with the Golem and the legend and lore and story and everything behind the Golem. It's so creepy, but very thought-provoking. And this does as good of a job of any movie I've seen that presents that concept, but does it in a way that feels grounded, because it does go supernatural. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but the movie itself, it feels very grounded. The period that it's set in, everything looks real. The way it's put together, it feels like something that really could have happened. And even when it goes supernatural, it has an air of realism to it. And so it just hits even harder. But I was so pleasantly surprised at the production of this, the acting, the way it's shot, the set design. I mean, everything in this is impeccably done. It gets very dark and disturbing and bleak, but I think it's a real hidden gem and one that's definitely worth checking out. Bloody Hell is a 2020 Australian comedy horror movie, directed by Alistair Gerson and written by Robert Benjamin. It stars Ben O'Toole, Carolyn Craig, and Matthew Sutherland. It tells the story of a man with a mysterious past who flees his homeland to escape his own personal hell, but unknowingly stumbles into a situation far more sinister and hellish.
Don't let them kill you.
So you guys know that every list, I try to end it with something that's fun, something that you can relax to and not take overly serious. And this is one of my favorite hidden gems, one that just not really anybody talks about, but I think it's amazing. I think it's so much fun. Ben O'Toole is incredible in it. He's charismatic and just has such a great personality. In a lot of ways, he reminds me of that hero character, kind of like Ash, where he's flawed, but also a badass. But this has it all. It gets gory, it gets creepy, it's uncomfortable, it's funny. It has so many things that are just entertaining to see. And it's a unique story that takes a lot of different twists and turns as it goes. It's a great movie to relax and have fun with. And I think it's a perfect pick for this Saturday night. So do yourself a favor this holiday season, pick one of the movies off of this list, grab your popcorn and your candy, and enjoy! And I want to give a huge, massive, enormous thank you to the Ghost Pirate crew, to you guys over on Patreon, and to the channel members over here. You guys mean so much to me. And if you would like to help support this channel over on Patreon, there's a link down in the description. Or you can become a channel member by clicking on the join button down there and help support the channel that way. But like always, thank you so much for watching. Please crush that like button. And remember, guys, horror can be fun. And if you enjoyed this, click right here to watch me talk about 10 movies that I highly recommend. And I'll see you guys next time.